question is platform dependent. If you are using Windows, then you have other programs or programming Italian, a subdirectory which is called R. And in this subdirectory, there is a file which contains the saved data. Usually it is called the file rdata, with capital R, capital D, and then lowercase a, e, a. This could be in a subdirectory of R, but the file is there. If you are using the Linux version, and I think the same applies to the Windows version, and if you go in the directory where you started out from, you will see two hidden files that appear, which are called rdata and rhistory. They contain the saved data. And I think it's the same in Mac. I think R is hidden files where the data are stored. And these files, if you look at the contents, you would learn that R data is a binary file. So you cannot read it by another program but R. So the only way to read the file R data, the only way to read this data is to use R. Instead, R history is an ASCII file. What does it mean, an ASCII file? The ASCII, probably you already know what is the ASCII format, is a universal format that can be read by Word, by Excel, by whatever program, whatever text editor. You can read an ASCII file. So R history is an ASCII file. If I write it with a notepad, I see the history of my instructions. So, please, your question. In italiano e traduco. Okay, are you working on Windows?
Yes.
Okay, so did you get into the R directory? There is a directory called bin, B-I-N. Go into bin, and I think there is, okay. And there is also the history file. No? And so you get into program R, I think it is there. What platform are you using? Ubuntu. Okay. Yeah, this is your question. The files you do? Okay, I think when do you start from R? Okay, so do this. Okay, let's solve the problem. First of all, please pay attention to what I'm saying now, and then I solve her problem and then your problem. So let's do this. System PWD. System is a way from R to execute a system command. And I'm not sure in Windows it could be system 32. System 32 like this. System 32 and you could say, I don't know, print working directory, try with here. System 32 here. okay? And did you get the directory? With system PWD, did you get the directory? You see. Not everything, just the system. Okay, you see on banana. If you go to on banana, then you find the file. You understand. Then you find the files. But they are hidden. Okay? Okay, so the problem is that you have to display now, if you are under banana here, okay, so you have to display the hidden files. So I don't use this, but let me try it. Ah, okay. Okay. So it should be here, but the problem is that you can see here the hidden size that you see. So this is okay, what is the ratio? Okay, you need it's a hidden file, so you need to get a file manager, and a suggestion could be Crusader, for instance, which allows you to display the hidden files. But I'm sure that it's possible also under this program. If you look on the web for the name of the program and hidden file, you should get the reply. L'avete trovato in Intel nel Windows, ok? Passo un attimo. Avete provato a fare una ricerca per che non lo trovo, però ci avete messo qui avete cercato solo in questo directory, giusto?
No, tutto sul computer.
Potrebbe essere.
Però se richiamo le variabili, cioè se salva, chiude, riapre e richiamo le variabili deve far vedere, quindi vuol dire che
No, non so, non c'è. Sì,
non mi mette una cartella impostata.
guarda che provo anch'io.
allora io farei una cosa, provate a fare una non vorrei che ci fosse in mezzo delle origini. Ci usa cioè potrebbe essere un po' deve essere quello just one second, I'm looking for the file and can you bring the back to video with the
Desktop.
manager we used?
Sì. Niente, ma fai LS, la piattaforma che giocare, cioè se no quando fai salva, se tu fai salva dove vuoi tu?
Perché di solito mi dà
Yeah. Anyway, it is there. The only way is the only problem is to get the way to visualize it if you need that. But this is not really needed at this stage. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to our business and share file. Okay. it's very unlikely that you need to get to the file, to open the file with other programs. It's just very much important that you save the data and that you know, just in case if something goes wrong, where you can get the file back. But it's unlikely that you need to open it with another program. Okay, now there is one important thing to remember. And if I display the history, you see that there is, we can get a whole list of our past instructions. But as I said, not all of them are saved, only a limited number of past information. So I don't remember if they are 1,000 instructions rather than 200. The important thing that you have to keep in mind is that not everything is automatically saved. So if you want to really keep all your past history, it's important that you save it. So what I usually do at the end or sometimes, I do a save history command with file equal to, for instance, between commas, history1. .txt. Just 1 second, there is something. Okay, let me see. I'm just using the log function. Let me see what is. Save history without the dot. So you get the save history command, and then if you use a file manager, given that it was saved without the dot, now you find it. You see this my file, history1.txt, and if I open it, I have the full history. So it's better once in a while to save, and I think that if you browse these commands, these functions, you see that probably you find the information of how many past commands are saved, and also you see you can load an history. After you have saved a history file, you can load it if you want to reload it for some reasons. And I'm just trying to see if it tells us how many past instructions are saved. I can tell you they are many. Usually when I work for 3-4 hours, I don't save the history in between, because I know that everything is saved. But I noticed with very long working sessions, like working session that took me several days, I noticed that I lost some of the really primary instructions. And I think it is this variable, you should read here, okay? We cannot spend much time in this detail, but you should read here. You see that there is the default is 512. So this is what we were looking for, and it can be changed. It can be changed by following these instructions. So if you are interested, just look here. It's important to note that the default value is 512. Okay, so far we did nothing. So let's now inspect one important feature of R, which is a first step towards programming. For instance, let's suppose that we want to compute a series of operations on a variable. Let's define A equal to, and then let's say that we want to compute the square root of 2, SQRT2. And then let's suppose that we want, oh sorry, not 2, A. And let's suppose that we want to assign the result to the variable B. Okay? And then let's suppose that we want to assign a third variable, which is B times 4. And then a fourth one, which is equal to B to the power of 1/3. Okay? And now let's assume that we have to repeat these operations for a different value of A. And when we have to repeat operations and to repeat a sequence of several instructions, this is the time in which programming becomes useful. If you have the same series of instructions to repeat many times for different conditions, typically different starting variables, this is the instance in which programming becomes useful. So every time that you have to do one calculus more than once, you should ask yourself, should I write a program? In this case, let's suppose that we realize now that we want to do this sequence of operations, which led me to get an E value of 1.12. Let's assume that we want to repeat for different values of A. So, of course, one possibility is to go back. So I could say, okay, A equals 3, and then go back. B square root of A, B, E, no, E, and then E. So this is one possibility. But of course you see that I made a mistake, because when you do things many times, you face to make some mistakes. So there is another opportunity. And the second opportunity is to write the instructions, apart from the definition of the variable, to write the instruction on a file. And for instance, I may write an history file. I go back to the same history command. Okay. And then I go to my history file, which is this one. I delete everything but the instruction that I would like to repeat many times, which are these. So I just saved the instruction that I want to repeat. Not the first one is not needed. So take the square root of A, define a variable D. Let me see if I can. Yeah. Define a variable D, which is B times 4, and then compute the power of 1/3, and then visualize the result. Okay, I can save this file, and then what I can do in R, I can do two things. First of all, I can select, I'm using this text editor. You can use Notepad. In Windows, you can use whatever text editor you want under Ubuntu. I can select everything. Let me just put a record here. And then I can copy. After selection, copy. Then I can go back to R. And then I can say, okay, A equal 10. And then I can paste. And you see everything that has been repeated. This is a program. This is a first program. And it's something that you cannot do. You can do it in Excel, because still Excel allows you to change the content of a cell and to get the result. You can do it in Excel. So it's still something that you can do. And there is another possibility. After typing A equal 10, instead of doing cut and paste, which may seem more practical, but indeed it's not really practical, because you know, after a while you lose the content of the clipboard, and it's not really practical. You could tell R to load the content of the file directly. And this is very simple. Source. And then you have to get the file which was same history. I just put SA and then it was not same history, it was history. Yeah, you see, with a tab in, because if I'm working the same directory, I just put the comma and then H, here it is. Then it loaded the file and you get the value of it. I don't understand why it didn't display. Let me see. Because I didn't save the file. Now let me see, A equal 20, and then the source. No, doesn't display the result. When you use the source command, it doesn't displays the output to the screen. But in any case, you get the results there. And you can do A equal 30, and then source, and then E. This is programming. So there was one very, let's say, rude option, cut and paste. One more refined option, load the file. There is a third option, which is the most elegant in this case, which is really writing a program, which means writing a function for R. So now let's write the function. How to write a function in R? You can define a function by working with a command line. So let's suppose, for instance, that you want to write a very simple function that does like this. You define A equal 10, and the function is to define, to compute A times 20, which is very simple. Let us define the function. Now, to write a function, to define a function, oh sorry, let's say like test equal function A. A is the name of the variable to be used in the function. If you have just one, it's 1. Otherwise, if I have 2, A, B, C, D, whatever. This means that you have to define the arguments of the function. Okay, if I enter now, if I hit on the enter key, you see that there is a plus. What means the plus? The plus means that R is expecting from you something more. Every time that you see this plus means I need some more. Of course, because you said to R that you are writing a function, now you want that you define the function. And how can we define a function then? We need, first of all, to open a third level parenthesis, which is this one. And now the first trick is how to get this third level parenthesis. Okay, let's try with the Italian keyboard with Alt-GR, Alt-GR, not Alt, Alt-GR and 7. Did you get it? No. I think you are on the keyboard probably with the third level parenthesis, so it may be that so you don't have any problem. Posso darti un dato vedere? No, no, non dovrebbe dare anche così senza più. essere i tasti di numerico.
Mettiamo...
Sì, però ci deve essere. Però adesso non può chiudere. Adesso sta andando. Alt Shift, questa, Alt GR, Shift, e la parentesi quadra. Okay, so we solve this problem. So, what does it mean the third level parenthesis open? It means that you are opening a parenthesis. And why do you need to open a parenthesis? Because your function is composed by a series of instructions, not just one. So you want to tell R that he has to expect a series of instructions to form the function, and the instruction will be, the series of instructions will be terminated by a third level closing parenthesis. So now I can write B equal A times 20, and then I can write return B, which means give me back the B value. Now I can close the third level parenthesis, and you see that nothing happens. But if you list the variable, you see that there is a variable named test. What is that? If you write test, it's the function. Now, let's try test 10, 200, test 15, 300. You have defined the function. It is a bit unpractical to define the function in the command line, because if you make a mistake, you have to rewrite all the instructions. So it's a bit unpractical. If it's a very simple function, then you can write it by using the command line. But if it is complicated, then it's not really practical. So, if, for instance, we want, and let me go back to the original function that I wrote in this file. If we want to write this function, which is a bit complicated, I prefer not to use the command line, but writing the function in the file. So, test equal function A. I put the parenthesis, and then here, return E, closing parenthesis. This is my function. And then, of course, we need to load the function in R. How can we load the function in R? Let me go back to R. I just need to repeat, sorry, Control L. I just need to repeat the source command. Nothing happens, but now, if I do test, you see the more complicated function that appears, and then we can do test 2, test 10, etc. Or you can also use test A, because I defined the value for A, which was 10. A is 10. Test A is like test 10, of course. We already programmed the function. And we already made a program. This is programming. This is still something that you can do in Excel, with more or less the same effort. Maybe that if the function is very simple, it's simpler to do that in Excel. But now let me show you something which is interesting, and then we make a break. So I have this test function. So as I said, if I do test 10, you get the result for 10. If I do